Hello, and welcome to Flying Failures, where we'll be looking at the Armstrong Whitworth AW.55 Apollo. Developed as part of the Brabazon Committee of World War II, the Armstrong Whitworth AW.55 Apollo was built as a competitor to the pioneering Vickers Viscount Turboprop, but due to significant engine problems, would never go beyond 2 prototypes, and instead end its days rapidly, while the Viscount it was hoping to overcome went on to huge success across the globe. Commencing in 1942, at a time when the outcome of World War II was still very much undecided, the Brabazon Committee, chaired by Lord Brabazon of Tara, was established in order to develop a series of post-war commercial airliners that would help to maintain Britain's place in the world of civil aviation, laying down broad specifications and beginning early assembly work for models which were to be released prior to the end of the conflict, examples including the Avro York, which itself was derived from the famous Lancaster bomber. Among the various categorizations for the Brabazon Committee, the Type 2 classification was for a new regional feeder liner driven by propellers that would carry between 24 and 30 passengers, although due to disagreements by the various committee members regarding specifications and new technology, a consensus of opinion could not be found with regard to what type of propulsion would be used to drive the eventual Type 2 airliner, the options being either pre-existing piston-powered units or the innovative Turboprop powerplant, which was being developed by the likes of Rolls-Royce, the result being the splitting of the Type 2 classification into Type 2A, a piston-powered version of the airliner, which would be maintained as a backup, and ultimately came to fruition as the Airspeed Ambassador, with 2 Bristol Centaurus Mark 661 sleeve valve piston engines, and Type 2B, which incorporated turboprops, and was designated under Air Ministry Specification 8/46. Even at its earliest design stages, though, the turboprop powerplant proved to be leaps and bounds better than the previous piston-powered technology of airliners such as the existing Douglas DC-3, with the Vickers Aircraft Company insisting that turboprops be the way forward due to their efficiency, power, and lower internal vibrations which improve passenger comfort. The desire for the Brabazon Committee to engender healthy competition between the various companies brought in to deliver the proposed models, so as to create an optimized airliner, leading to 2 eventual contenders for the Type 2B category. The Vickers VC2 Viceroy with 4 Rolls-Royce Dart turboprop engines with centrifugal flow compressors, and the Armstrong Whitworth AW.55 Apollo with 4 Armstrong Siddeley AS1 AS2 Mamba turboprop engines with axial flow compressors. The Sir W.G. Armstrong Whitworth Aircraft Company, or known simply as the Armstrong Whitworth Aircraft Company, had been established in 1912 and was part of the wider Armstrong Whitworth empire that dated back to 1847. The fruits of this gigantic organization, which spanned multiple engineering and design fields, including forays into car building, shipbuilding, armaments, locomotives, and hydroelectric power, the firm's previous aircraft endeavours being primarily fighters and bombers that saw action in both World War I and World War II, including the AW-38 Whitley medium bomber, which proved to be of invaluable assistance during the early days of the Battle of Britain in providing strategic bombing capabilities, and the extremely innovative but ultimately unsuccessful AW-52 Flying Wing jet fighter concept. Early development work for the Apollo began at the AWA Bainton factory during late 1946, the initial concept calling for a pressurized low-wing monoplane design that could seat between 24 and 30 passengers, and would be powered by 4 of the Armstrong Siddeley Mamba turboprop engines of April 1946, the Mamba being a compact power plant which featured a 10-stage axial compressor, 6 combustion chambers, and a 2-stage power turbine, while an epicyclic reduction gearbox was incorporated into the propeller spinner, the Mamba's first widespread application being on the Bolton Paul Balliol low-wing trainer for the Fleet Air Arm and the Royal Air Force, becoming the first ever single-engine turboprop design to be flown, of which 229 examples would eventually be built. Power output for the Mamba being 1,010 horsepower per engine, with a proposed maximum speed of 330 miles an hour and a range of 940 miles. The 4 AS1 power plants would be fixed to the aircraft on very slim wing-mounted nacelles, this being the world's first application of an axial flow turboprop engine on a commercial airliner, with the exception of experimental installations. The extreme slimness of the engine nacelles, meaning that the main elements of the tricycle-type undercarriage had to retract directly into the wings, rather than the inboard engine pods as per other contemporary piston-powered aircraft. The Apollo also featuring a mid-position horizontal stabilizer and elevator complex, the final design being 71.6 feet long, having a wingspan of 92 feet, and can carry between 26 and 31 passengers. Work on the first prototype, Golf Alpha India Yankee November, commenced in late 1947, and by March 1949 the airframe was completed and designated the test registration Victor X-ray 220, the maiden flight of this unit taking place on April 10, 1949, with Chief Test Pilot Eric Franklin at the controls for the 30-minute voyage. The Apollo immediately encountering design flaws, as during early flights it was found that the directional and longitudinal stability of the aircraft were unsatisfactory, and although these control problems were quickly remedied, with an increased tailplane span and fin area, the biggest faults with the Apollo were in fact its 4 Mamba engines. The Mambas, which were rated at 1,010 horsepower, had been designed specifically for small, lightweight fighter aircraft and trainers, and thus, having been employed on a full-size commercial airliner, were completely ill-suited to the task, being extremely underpowered and just barely able to get the empty Apollo airborne itself, let alone with a full complement of passengers, cargo and crew. The inability for the aircraft to respond promptly, due to its lack of power, making it incredibly difficult to fly, and after only 9 hours of cumulative testing time, the temporary certificate of airworthiness, as issued by the Secretary of State for Air, was revoked pending further engine development. Meanwhile, at Vickers, their VC-2 Viceroy, renamed to the Viscount following the independence of India from the British Empire in 1947 and the dissolving of the title Viceroy of India from which the aircraft derived its name, was proceeding without any major hitches due to the far superior Rolls-Royce Dart engines, presenting performance and reliability that far exceeded Armstrong Whitworth's Mambas, the Dart going on to become a staple of the modern aircraft industry with applications that spread across all manner of different civil and military models, although this isn't to say that the Mamba wasn't a capable power plant when configured correctly and put to work with the right aircraft, as demonstrated with the Fairey Gannet, a carrier-based anti-submarine and recon model that saw widespread use with the Fleet Air Arms of Great Britain and Australia, the West German Marineflieger, and the Indonesian Navy's aviation arm, the main difference being that the Mambas utilised by the Fairey Gannet were modified to be operated as a combined twin-engine unit using a common gearbox and contra-rotating propellers, allowing for simultaneous use for performance or individual use for efficiency, each engine being capable of individual shutdown to reduce fuel consumption on long-range recon flights. This modified variant of the power plant being dubbed the Double Mamba and was capable of up to 4,000 horsepower. Back with the Apollo, a second prototype, Golf Alpha Mike Charlie Hotel, designated test registration Victor X-ray 224, was launched in December 1949 and used for static ground training, but despite various amendments to the Mamba engine, including the replacement of the aircraft's original 3-bladed propeller with a 4-bladed one, reliability issues continued to persist, it being found that the Mamba turboprops placed into the Apollo were only capable of achieving 800 horsepower, while in the face of competition against the upcoming VC-2, an increase in the fuselage size of the Viscount, which was done at no major expense to the aircraft's efficiency, while also improving its economic operation, meant the Apollo's chances of being a viable opponent were rapidly waning, even though a temporary airworthiness certificate had been reinstated for the model in August 1949, thus allowing test flights to resume. Eventually, in October 1950, the Apollo was granted a limited category certificate of airworthiness to allow for the conveyance of non-fare paying passengers, and on March 12, 1951, undertook a proving flight from Bainton to Paris-Le Bourget in 1 hour and 26 minutes, though this achievement only proved to illustrate how sluggish the airliner was when compared to the Viscount, which could perform the same journey in approximately 55 minutes at regular cruising speed, Armstrong Whitworth desperately attempting to drum up support by pitching the elegant-looking model to various European airlines, including BEA and Air France, but by this point it was clear to any potential customers that the troublesome airliner had no hope of redeeming itself, especially when, in late 1951, all test flights were forced to stop due to the ongoing engine problems rendering the Apollo dangerous to fly, the clear victor of the Brabazon Committee's Type 2B specification being the Vickers Viscount, which would eventually enter commercial service in 1953 and become one of the most successful airliners in the world. As for the Apollo, all attempts to pursue this machine as a viable commercial product for airlines was axed in June 1952 at the insistence of the Armstrong Whitworth management, and as both prototypes were technically the property of the British government, each of them reverted to the ownership of the Aeroplane and Armament Experimental Establishment at Boscombe Down in September of the same year, the first prototype seeing little operational use and was eventually cut up for scrap in 1955, while the second prototype was initially used by the Empire Test Pilots School for the training of flight crew in multi-engined aircraft in 1954, before eventually seeing work with the Structures Department at the Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough in 1955, being used extensively as part of the investigations into the Comet jet airliner crashes, so as to gain further knowledge of the largely unknown phenomenon of metal fatigue, this unit ultimately languishing at the RAE until the mid-1970s, whereupon it was finally broken up. The failure of the Apollo, despite not resulting in many initial implications for Armstrong Whitworth, would in fact spell the beginning of the end for the firm, as due to the company's inability to create a viable commercial airliner, and thus being forced to rely solely on military contracts for income during the 1950s, meant that by March 1957, upon the publishing of the Defence White Paper by the Conservative government of Harold Macmillan, a swathe of cuts were made to upcoming manned fighter and bomber projects in order to focus instead on surface-to-air and ballistic missile schemes as part of the ongoing Cold War, and thus, with the majority of its income having been dried up, the firm quickly collapsed into bankruptcy and was forced to merge with Gloucester Aircraft to create the Whitworth Gloucester Aircraft Company, a name that would remain under the Hawker Siddeley corporate empire before being fully absorbed in 1963. In the end, while the Armstrong Whitworth AW.55 Apollo was indeed a stylish and purposeful-looking machine, the critical flaw with this promising little aircraft was the company's insistence on using their own engines, which, as proven time and again, was simply not designed to manage the weight of a full-size commercial airliner, leading inevitably to the project's overall failure and the protracted demise of Armstrong Whitworth itself, although, had the far more reliable Rolls-Royce Dart engines been used instead, one wonders which course the Apollo may have taken in delivering a small regional turboprop, and whether a Dart-powered AW.55 could indeed have finally been a viable competitor to the ever-present Vickers Viscount.